Welcome to another edition and our final regular season edition of GOAZCATS.com Arizona Football Preview Show. I'm your host, Troy Hutchison, joined alongside Arizona football legend Joe Tafoya and Matt Moreno. And guys, last week Arizona went into Washington State. They kind of played tough through the first quarter. It was 7-0 Cougars through that first quarter. Arizona got back in it 14-7. And then from that point on, it was all Cougs. From Matt, you covered the game from beginning to end. What happened?
It felt like a very Washington State, Arizona making the trip to Pullman type of game where it was close at the beginning. You said, okay, maybe this is, going to go their way. And then the fog starts to roll in. You can't see half of the field on TV. And apparently it was just as bad when you were there in person. And, it started snowing a little bit. As Joe told us, he brought us his forecast straight from Washington that it was going to snow a little bit, and kind of played into everything. And then you just kind of started to unravel. And to me, there were moments when I said, this feels like the USC game, which obviously that's the other air raid type of team that they played. I thought their deficiencies are pretty exposed in this game, especially in the secondary, the safety group. Again, not to pick on Jaden Young, but Jaden Young was the one who was getting burnt a lot by Drake London in that USC game. Continued to be the guy that they went after and attacked. No fault of his own. He's limited by what he can do talent-wise and his skill set. Can't improve that necessarily a ton over the course of the season. And Washington State came back and did the same thing. Obviously, if you're Arizona, you're dropping into playing more nickel and playing with some more DBs on that back end. There's some depth issues there where once you get past that first group, there's just a lack of talent, I think, at those positions. And Washington State found the gap in the defense and really attacked it. And that pass-heavy team, that pass-heavy attack really made things difficult for Arizona. And it was just that was all she wrote, made it difficult for them to climb back. Again, they're not the type of team right now that's going to win in a shootout, it doesn't feel like. And that's the kind of game that they found themselves in. It was just a difficult game for them, especially with all the fog and everything else going on.
I mean, if I had to say one thing about the game, it was sloppy. From beginning to end, it was sloppy. It just felt like whatever Washington State wanted to do, they did. Troy mentioned early in the game, it looked like it might be competitive. And then they really opened up the game with the running game, to be honest. And once that took off and they were able to execute on the running game, when the ball broke into the secondary, it was lights out. I mean, they did everything that they wanted to do, and they made the Arizona Wildcats defense look very porous and very second class. Really disappointed. To me, this was, apropos for what's gone on for the whole season. You come in with high expectations and things start to go wrong, and then they just really snowballed after that. And it just continued to snowball and go the direction we didn't want to go. Thankfully, the national audience probably didn't stay and watch for very long because it was hard to watch the game. I stayed and, watched the entire game, but I had to, really look through my goggles to figure out what the heck was going on. It was so foggy. And, when the score gets out of hand like that, two teams playing late at night, not a lot of people watch. So hopefully the national audience doesn't factor in when it comes to recruiting this next season. But, just another disappointing game. Early on, when the game first started, I thought, hey, maybe we have a chance that we can be competitive. My prediction was that Arizona was going to win this game, and boy, was I off, and off by a big margin. I don't remember the final score because it was embarrassing, but, not a good game to put down on paper, especially when the last game that you're going to have a kick-ass defensive coordinator for.
Yeah, I think a couple telling signs in that game, because I covered the men's and women's basketball game, but I kept an eye on the game, is one, Arizona had the ball, their first drive, 4th and inches, with a chance to really take control of the game. They're in Washington State territory. You run a quarterback sneak. I got to see the play on a live stream. Not even close. And Jed mentioned that wasn't the play design, that he feels that Will Plummer saw that play from somewhere else. I forget what game he was talking about, and decided to take it on his own and didn't work out. So that's one play there. Second play was Arizona had Washington State after a penalty on a 1st and 15 on their 26-yard line, Arizona's 26-yard line. And the Cougars break off a 26-yard run for a touchdown. on first and 15, sorry. So that's another poor down and distance, and you let it slip through your fingers. And then lastly, you get in that game, make it 14-7 with 2 minutes left in the game. Yeah, Washington State, well, in the half, I should say. Yeah, Washington State on their 18-yard line on a 2nd and 16, and you let them break off a 39-yard run, coupled with a 43-yard touchdown pass to end the drive right before half. Those 3 plays, killer for Arizona.
All those things you just mentioned, they're all things, as Joe alluded to, things we've talked about all season long. This very much to me felt like a game that we would have seen in the first half of the season. Again, going back to the point you just made about Will Plummer kind of coming up with something on his own, that was something that was talked about early in the season. They, I believe on an interception he threw, he kind of saw something and did something that he didn't normally do. Defense, they looked like they took a step back. The entire team just felt like it took a step back. And again, Joe alluded to it as well, the Don Brown situation, how much does that play into things for the defense? But overall, it just felt like a game that we had seen early in the season and not the game that we saw them play against Utah and Cal. And those games where it felt like, oh, they're making progress every week and they're starting to really go in the right direction. This felt like a game that we saw early in the season. And that's not a good thing for Arizona when you're heading into, your rivalry matchup.
That's, the one X factor here is that it's a long way to go. They traveled a long way. And the climate, you guys, it's cold up here in the Pacific Northwest. It was 37 degrees 2 days ago. So how much did that factor into it? Cold, snowing. Our boys aren't used to that. It's a long drive from the airport to get to the hotel, from the hotel to Pullman. No excuses here, but those things do factor in.
Well, and the team talked about it after the game when on their way home from the stadium. They weren't sure they were going to be able to take off that night because of the fog. Yeah. They thought that they were going to have to drive back to Pullman, wake up the next day and take out. Obviously that didn't happen. They were able to fly out, but I mean, if you're thinking about that too, obviously the weather's plays a factor. Now, Matt, you mentioned it, Don Brown, at that time, it was speculated that he would be involved in the UMass head coaching decision, potentially becoming the UMass head coach. Now we know he is going to be the UMass head coach, a 5-year deal for Don Brown in the works. He will talk about it more off the season. So after the season, I know he might be in the press conference, the post-game press conference after the ASU game. They will have an official press conference on Sunday. I'm sure Don Brown will be a part of that. He'll be off to UMass, a place that, that's where he got to start as a head coach, was a defensive coordinator there. That's home for him. And I believe we have a caller with some Don Brown-esque questions.
Yeah, on that note, Gabriel called in previously, right before Don Brown was officially announced, to kind of get our take on things. Obviously, now that Don Brown is officially leaving, that leaves a big hole for Arizona at the defensive coordinator position. He didn't last even 1 year for Arizona. There's been a few coaches who have not made it the full year, but obviously he's such a key part of what they're trying to do. Jed Fish is pretty hands-off when it comes to the defense. He has his hands full with, the offensive side of the ball and what he's trying to do. So, he turned things over to Don Brown on the defensive side. And so obviously Arizona needs to fill those shoes, and was well respected by the other coaches, well respected by the players. They made it a priority to play very hard for him. So obviously there's a big gap for Arizona now. And so this question is relating to kind of the future now that we know Don Brown is on his way out. So we'll play that from Gabriel, and then we'll come back and talk about it a little bit.
Who do you think could replace Don Brown with the defensive coordinating job at Arizona? Thank you so much. Bear down.
Great question, my friend. This is the topic of conversation at the U of A right now. Let's face it. Don Brown was not long for this program. We were lucky to have him, a guy with his football resume. He came in, and I have to say, as far as like other teams putting up big numbers against us, it didn't look all that great. But at the same time, if you look at the history of the program and where we started at the beginning of this year to where we are now, compare that with the last several years, our defense, the defensive side of the ball was extraordinary. I mean, it was a big change. So, obviously he's going back to his hometown. first thing I would like to say is congratulations, Coach Brown. Very well deserved. Hope you and your family enjoy it. Thank you for your time here in Arizona and for helping build this program with these young men. But now we're on to the next guy. And, we all have our favorites. We have some fan favorites. We've got some, we've had a long discussion about this prior to the show. And let's start throwing some names out there, boys. What do you guys think?
I mean, to me, the first one that jumps out is Jimmy Lake. If you're trying to make a splash, you want a big name. He obviously can recruit. That's been a big part of what he's done, what has led to his success, what led him to become the head coach at Washington after Chris Peterson decided to leave. That was a big part of it. And so the other thing is, he can coach defense. Didn't have a great success as the head coach of the Huskies, but he can coach defense. And his style of play and what he wants to do defensively has attracted something that Arizona has not had consistently, really, in my time covering the team, which is NFL caliber players, especially in the secondary. When we're talking about the Pac-12, you know what most of the teams want to do in the Pac-12. They want to pass the ball. You need to have a stout secondary, not just at the corner spots, but across the board. You need to have an entire defensive back group that is NFL level to have success. And so I think he'll attract the type of talent that Arizona needs defensively. And he's been a pretty solid defensive coach in his own right. So I think he's one name to know, but there's going to be a lot of different options, I think, that come out. And obviously Jedd Fisch, when you look at how he pieced together his entire staff this first year, a lot of it came down to people he's crossed paths with, has had, relationships with in the past. And so I think that'll play into it as well.
I mean, Gabriel, it's a good question. And, Troy, you and I talked about this earlier. My favorite guy is Joe Tafoya. I think Joe Tafoya deserves a shot. Whether or not he wants that shot, he's already been kind of, let's say, pushed to the side a few times by this program. Maybe not by this particular coaching staff, but definitely I think that, if you look at his resume and what he's done with Oregon, look at the Oregon defensive line. They have some of the best, they may have the best defensive linemen in the entire country over there. They're going to have several, top caliber NFL picks. And plus, a guy like that, you open up the entire Polynesian recruiting pipeline with Joe Tafoya, hometown boy. He's always wanted to be there. A lot of legacy. Let's get personal with it, Jed. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love those two picks. Those are two of my top candidates. Jimmy Lake being my top guy, and then Joe Tafoya, just because of the situation he's at Oregon, just leaving for another defense coordinating job doesn't appeal as much. I don't know Joe Tafoya personally, but I think it would take a lot for Arizona to get him at this point. Like you said, being pushed aside in past years at Arizona from different coaching staffs. But I mean, Jedd Fisch talks about going back to the roots of Arizona football. That's all he's ever talked about. Getting back to hard-nosed defensive football. One guy to keep an eye on is on staff with Ricky Hundley. I think he's done a tremendous job as the defensive line coach at Arizona. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of experience as a head DC. Number two, for me personally, you go get a former head coach that coached this program here in Tucson. He's over at Florida Atlantic right now, learned underneath Nick Saban for a couple of years, getting back into the groove. And he had success recruiting here with, let's face it, shitty facilities. Mike Stoops. Mike Stoops' time here in Tucson, he was able to put guys in the NFL, develop them. You had Antoine Cason, you had Brooks Reed, Earl Mitchell, Ricky Elmore, and the list goes on and on. That's just a handful of guys, but he put guys in the NFL with crappy facilities and somehow had a top 14 recruiting class during his time in Tucson. So the guy knows the area. He knows how to recruit. He knows what it takes to win in Tucson. And, a lot of first-year head coaches have former head coaches on their staff. I know you have Dwayne Walker, who was at New Mexico State, but Mike Stoops has a long history of being a head coach. I know it's here in Tucson, but it was, I believe, 6 years, 7 years? Am I getting the math right on that one?
I mean, he just took over at Florida Atlantic. They're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
You never know. I like the call on that one. But Matt, my question's for you. why is it important to have a top caliber coach come in at that role?
I think for recruiting purposes, you need to make a splash. And I think that's the big reason why. I think you want name recognition. And yes, most of the coaches that are probably going to end up being part of the candidate pool are not coaches that the regular fan knows and that recruits are paying attention to. There's only a few select names in terms of DCs that you can even really point to that you go, oh yeah, I want to play for that guy. Don Brown was one of those guys. And so I think it's important to kind of have that name recognition. And for Arizona right now, you're trying to build this thing and just keep the momentum going that Don Brown built. And that's going to be key. And I think it starts with keeping the current class together. And I think if you hire somebody that either they all know, have been recruited by, or just are familiar with, I think that will go a long way towards helping them. But if you do want to go on the other side of it and go with someone that's maybe a little bit more unknown, although if you are in college football circles, he's very much known. Kurt Maddox from San Diego State has done a really good job the last couple of years. For Arizona, it's funny when you talk about the transfer portal and all those things, coaches will always kind of point to, hey, I played that guy and he did really well against us. And so I want him on my team. Right. If you look at this in the coaching perspective, Arizona knows firsthand what Kurt Maddox is capable of as a defensive coordinator because they saw it firsthand this season. And so that could be one of those things where it's in the back of Jedd Fisch's mind. Hey, it was really difficult to play against that team. And we didn't have a lot of success offensively against that team. Obviously, Jedd Fisch is going up against him head to head because, he's the offensive play caller going up against the defensive play caller. And so he's one name to maybe keep an eye on that's kind of outside the Arizona sphere of guys that we have been talking about. Would be kind of that mid-major guy that's kind of would be rising to a new level, playing at the Power 5 level. Maybe he's someone else to keep an eye on. You have to figure, and based on what Jedd Fisch said, they're ready to compensate somebody, that they offered Don Brown fair compensation to stick around and to not take that job at UMass. That's a big step because Arizona hasn't always been that school that says, hey, we'll fork up the money and we'll pony up and get the top guy here. Every year, every offseason, there's so many guys that are moving around. We know that money is going up every offseason. Guys are getting paid more and more and more. Arizona's now at least kind of in the ball game a little bit with what they're willing to pay. And I think that's going to be big. And maybe you can pull, one of these top up and comer guys from a smaller school and get him on your staff. If not, maybe you do have to look at, someone like Jimmy Lake or one of these other guys that, is coming off a job where they just got fired or a different situation. And I think those are your options. I just think there's always going to be fans who think you can go get, the top line guy. That SEC money is different. I mean, they have a lot of money to offer, even at Oregon. We're talking about Joe Tafoya. It would have to be one of those situations, I think, where it's just based on his love of Arizona. Because if Arizona says, hey, this is what we're willing to pay to have you come in and be our DC, Oregon's just gonna be like, well, we'll just pay you more because we can. And that's the big issue if you're Arizona trying to pull a top defensive coordinator of this program is just the money issue because other programs can simply just offer more.
An elephant in the room for me, Troy. I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to get your take on this one. Why is Antonio Pierce's name not coming up?
Well, Antonio Pierce, obviously there's been speculation going back a long time since Coach Tomey was fired at the end of his tenure that he holds a grudge, one against Arizona. I don't know how true that is, but I mean, that is one of the themes out there. 2, he's an ASU guy, but I don't think Arizona cares about that too much. If you played football at the U of A, I don't think they care. But 3, the big one, ASU is going through a lot of recruiting issues right now. You're talking about potential bowl bans on the program. I know there's a lot of assistant coaches involved with that, but Antonio Pierce's name is in that. He's a part of that staff. And with all the stuff Arizona just went through with the FBI and basketball, you can't have that on campus. No matter if it is a former player, if he's guilty or not, it's just the stigma of everything around Antonio Pierce and ASU.
I'll tell you what, I had a coach named Greg Blosh, who was my defensive coordinator when I played for Chicago. And I started getting in a little bit of trouble there. And he said, listen, Joe, I don't care if you were part of Al-Qaeda. If you can rush the passer and you can help me win, you're going to play on this team. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe that's not the right mentality, especially at the college level. But, I played with Antonio. I played with Joe Tafoya. I'm a hometown boy. I love both of those guys. I'd like to see some more of that blood come through. and, bring that style of defense back to U of A. Just my personal opinion.
Now, I do have a question with the San Diego State idea. Am I wrong in saying that San Diego State runs a 3-3-5 though? And would that come back to Tucson and fans?
And that was something I kind of wanted to pose to Joe was, if let's say you're an AD right now, you're the AD of Arizona, even you being you and having played and having an understanding of kind of the culture and kind of everything on that we know is, in college football. What would you prioritize? Would you prioritize, hey, I need to continue to keep Don Brown's system because that's what the players have started to learn? Or do you just say, what do you prioritize in this situation?
No, you always have to take a look at who you have on your roster. And with college, it's different. Whenever you have a coaching change in the NFL, they always bring their own guys in with them. You're stuck with these guys here at this level, and even the ones that are coming in. So you have to look at what kind of athletes you have. And when you're designing a defense, you have to design it around what you have. If you have a guy that's going to come in and try and put a square peg in a round hole, it's just not going to work. So I think at this level, it's important to understand who we have, who's coming up through the pipeline, and how can we design a defense around them. Athletic director, I don't know how much he pays attention to recruiting, hopefully a lot, but we've got some guys coming in and we have some young guys that are hungry to play. Let's build a defense around those guys. That's how I prioritize it. If you try and force a guy like me, for example, to play a 3 defensive lineman defensive end position, I'm going to get pushed around. I'm smaller. You want a guy that's big, beefy, heavy guy that's playing on the outside in those 3 defensive lineman positions. I don't know that we have that type of thing right now.
And to your point, sure, I think the 3-3-5, we're not that far removed from Arizona playing the 3-3-5. I mean, there's still a lot of players on this roster who played in that system or at least in the 4-2-5 are more familiar with, having 5 DBs back there. So I don't think it would be that foreign to them. I think the other thing too, that I want to touch on earlier, but just kind of came back to me is Don Brown has kind of showed that you can do it. He's running a completely different system than they ran last year. The roster isn't that much different. They brought in some new pieces, but the roster defensively is not that much different. And so the coach can make a difference in this situation, even with a similar level of talent. So I think that's something to remember too, where maybe you don't have to, as you said, kind of try and fit a square peg into a round hole, where you can just kind of say, what do you have? I'm going to run kind of whatever I run and we'll figure it out. But I think the positive thing that Don Brown showed Arizona fans, showed the program is, hey, yes, the coach can make a difference and bring in a different system and have success and turn things around. And I think that's important to remember, that if you hire the right guy, it's not taking a step back. You can build on what, he's been able to do so far.
Truth, a lot of truth to that.
And I just want to kind of on the flip side of what Joe was saying, yes, the coach can adapt to the players and all that, but beware of letting a player dictate your hire. We saw that kick Arizona in the butt a couple of years ago. Don't let a player dictate the hire. Make the hire based off of the future.
We don't have that caliber of player on the defense right now, so we don't have to worry about that.
So Arizona, they're going to face their rivals this week, the team up north, Arizona State. It's the Territorial Cup, the duel in the desert. And Joe, you're in the thick of this thing for many of years for Arizona. And right now, Arizona leads the series 49-44-1. The Sun Devils, though, have won the last 5 games in a row. And coming off of last season's 70-7 meltdown of Arizona, I'm sure revenge is on the Wildcats' minds.
I wanted to ask Joe one thing before you get started. Did you have a favorite name that you called them? Did you do anything that you didn't call them by a name? Or what was kind of your thing with ASU whenever this week came up, or even during the season when you be asked about them?
I'm a California boy. I grew up in California. I watched Cal Berkeley and UCLA. I watched, didn't know that much about this rivalry until my freshman year. Our offensive line coach was brought in specifically to talk to the entire team. Coach Tomey said, I want you all to listen. It's ASU week. This is an entirely new season. This is a different thing. Listen to Coach Dickey. Coach Dickey comes in and he cussed words that I've never heard before. He was throwing stuff. He was punching the wall. And I was like, what is happening? I didn't understand. And I don't know if the national media understands how vicious this rivalry is. These two organizations, these two programs hate each other on a level that hate shouldn't even be described. They hate each other. And I didn't know that. And so I get to Arizona State week. And after listening to Coach Dickey cuss, I go to practice and all of the coaches are cussing. And it's like, we're all angry and mad at each other, like nonstop cussing going on. I'm a freshman. I still don't really understand. I'm not even going to play in the game. I'm a freshman, a true freshman. I redshirted. And I just remember finally getting to the game, and we go out onto the field. Nobody shakes hands, and a fight breaks out immediately. One of our defensive linemen, Daniel Greer, he gets taken out by an offensive lineman. Total cheap shot, takes his knee. I'm standing next to a guy named Kelvin Efon, who's on the sideline with his helmet off. He plays on offense. Our defense is on the field. He puts his helmet on. He goes running onto the field and hammers the guy in the back, and a huge fight breaks out again. And I'm telling you guys, that's this rivalry in a nutshell. These two organizations, these two programs hate each other. And when I played in those games, there's spitting, there's arm twisting, there's cussing, there's eye poking. It is really, really something to see from down on the field. I'm not sure if that was your question, Matt, but I really needed to get that off my chest.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, is that the Richard Dice year where he played on a torn ACL?
That's right. That was the Richard
Yeah.
Dice year. We were playing against Jake Plummer, and I think they beat us, actually. No, so I'm sorry, it wasn't the Richard Dice year. It was the year after Richard Dice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that a lot of great games back in those days. A lot of great games recently too. Joe, the year they beat you, what was it like that season, that off season, going into that off season? Like after that game, what was it like going into the off season?
Well, they didn't put up 72 points on us, so I can't imagine what our program right now is talking about. But what I do know is that it left such a bad taste in our mouths that we couldn't wait to get back into the weight room. I think it was like maybe a week off, and then we're back in it, working out, getting ready, getting fired up for next season. And those are the only highlights that you remember. And you're playing those over and over in your head. When you lose to Arizona State, you could win every other game and lose that one, and the season wouldn't feel good. You'd feel like you had a bad season. You could lose every game and win that one, and it would feel good. And I'm telling you, this would be a really nice win for this program. We could really use this win right now after what happened to them last year and the way that the season's gone. This is one of those games that you throw everything out the window and you start from scratch. And this game is going to tell us a lot about what this team is made of also, because we really have nothing to play for. We're losing our defensive coordinator. We've had a tremendously terrible season, and we're going against Arizona State. I mean, if these guys aren't laying it out all out on the field on every single play, you almost want to get rid of them.
So Arizona last season, obviously 70-7, and I thought that was going to be like the Baltimore material for Arizona, putting the score maybe on their locker rooms and all that kind of thing. Jed Fish, during his press conference, he goes, when you're up 63-7 and it's 4th and 4 and it's in the third quarter and you see the other team pass for a first down, you don't forget.
Yeah.
And that was with a backup quarterback, albeit, but 4th and 4, 63-7, and they get a first down, go on to score the touchdown. That seems like a bigger bulletin board material for this team, because that's all they've talked about is that 4th and 4.
Well, I mean, I described to you guys what this rivalry is all about. There's a pure hatred. And if it was the other way around, we would have done the same thing to them. But let me ask you guys this. As fans, how does that make you feel?
Well, as somebody that grew up here in Tucson, obviously now, as a reporter, pretty unbiased, but as somebody that grew up in Tucson, you are kind of like grown up to hate ASU. That's how it is. I mean, your whole family is Arizona fans. You have that one weird cousin that's an ASU fan that nobody likes. They're in the back of the house. You just don't even bother them during this week. And, it's constant. Yeah, you might have some friends that are ASU fans, and it's a constant, like the whole year's, I don't know, 35-24, let's say the final score is. And you just say that at the end of every conversation. And you know exactly what they're talking about. And it's just like a little knife that goes in the side. And right now, ASU's got a pretty big knife of 70-7. And so I can't imagine what Arizona fans are feeling. I don't know if the NAU game was more disgusting to them or last year's ASU game. But yeah, it's a way of life.
That's a hatchet they've got in your back, and they're just kind of twisting that thing around.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and similar to you, Joe, I grew up in California. I didn't fully understand. I knew they hated each other to a certain extent, but when I first started covering it, became really, close to what was going on. I would go down on the field towards the end of the game where us in the media were allowed to go down on the field towards the end of the game in the fourth quarter. And some of those games were tight that I've covered. And you hear some things that you go, I didn't know that it was legal to say that to somebody. And there was moments where I remember one of the Arizona players, Luca Bruno, was getting carried off the field and he was done. I mean, he was injured. He had given it everything he had. And fans were just like saying every cuss word you could think of, saying stuff about his family. And he's trying to get carried off by his teammates to the locker room because he can't walk. And is brutal. It's just a brutal rivalry that I don't think people outside of it understand. I know Joe's kind of explained all that already, but it is a vicious rivalry that, there's some things where I just like, I can't believe someone else would say that to another human, let alone, just a college student. I mean, it's unreal, some of the things that you hear in those games. And as someone said, these fan bases haven't been together for a couple of years. They're a little bit concerned about what could potentially go down in the crowd this weekend because fans didn't get to be part of this game last year. Arizona fans 100% remember 70-7. And if there's any chance that Arizona can get some redemption, it could be very interesting to see what happens this weekend, in the crowd as well.
So
on the flip side of that, if I have a favorite memory from college football, from my college football days, it was the year, I think it was a senior, we played against ASU at ASU and beat them. The song that you sing after you win a game, all the guys get together in the locker room, pads are still on, you're still sweaty and smelly, and you put your hands together and you sing Bear Down. My favorite memory is singing Bear Down at ASU. We left the doors open so all the fans that were walking past that tunnel could hear us. We're screaming. I'm looking around. There's like random U of A fans that are piling in. Everybody's jumping over the fence to sing that song with us. It was one of my favorite memories all time. I really hope they get to experience that because that's going to drive them for next season. Sorry to cut you off, Troy.
No, you're good. That's an awesome memory. I was going to say, let me tell you a story in terms of fans. 2 stories. My dad grew up here in Tucson, but went to school at ASU. We had a cousin who owned a paint shop when he was in college out there in Tempe. And the tradition was to paint the other school's A. Well, he was the first person to do it. He went to ASU's A and painted that thing red and blue. So that's one of those traditions, and maybe we'll see it this year up in Tempe of that A getting painted. Number 2 is my cousin, diehard U of A fan, 87 years old, only missed 2 games his whole entire life. Back when Chuck Cecil was on the team, U of A beat ASU on a last-second field goal, Chuck's senior season, and he hopped the fence, and he's going to rush the field, and the security guard stops him and goes, "Whoa, you can't go on the field, sir." I was like, no, I'm Chuck Cecil's father. You got to let me on the field. And so they let him on the field, and he celebrates with the team. I was working at Jersey Mike's, and I ran into Chuck Cecil there, and I told him, "Hey, my cousin?" And he's like, "Who is he?" And I said, "Alex Hubbard." He goes, "Oh, you mean that crazy guy that said he was my father?" So players remember this kind of stuff that fans do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Some of my favorite memories, man. This is a very important game for our program, and a lot of bad things have happened this year. but you almost wipe the slate clean, just like I said earlier, and go out, play hard. If we can get this win against Arizona State, it kind of makes things feel a little bit better, especially going into the offseason.
The freedom that Arizona would go into the offseason with if it's able to get this win, and just I think it would lift even a bigger weight than the win against Cal. That was a big deal for them, but I think beating ASU, getting redemption for that loss last year for a lot of these players who are still on the team and went through it, I think it would be really meaningful for a lot of players. I think the coaches understand that as well. I think that's why we've seen Jed Fish make the decisions he's made this week. He cut off basically anybody talking to the media after he spoke on Monday. We didn't get to talk to players this week. Coaches didn't talk this week. It was 100% focused in on ASU, get ready for this game. I think he understands kind of the magnitude of it. He hasn't been through it himself, but I think he will understand it by the time Saturday rolls around. But I think he's sensing, to me, what I got was he's sensing the players' animosity towards ASU, what happened last year. And I think he's saying, no, these are my guys. This is my team. I'm in it now too. This is my rivalry too. And so I think that's big, and it's going to be very interesting, but I think it'll just be a big weight off their shoulders if they're able to get this win.
This is the type of film that, as a coach, and you look at this film and you evaluate it. Every single play will be evaluated, and you want to watch the guys who never give up, and the guys that are giving it their all, even towards the very end of the game, regardless of score. Those are my players. You see somebody give up, you take them down a notch, and that's just the way that this game is going to be played. If they're not giving it their all, if everybody that's on the field is not giving it their all, you take them down a notch. I don't care who they are.
Now, looking at ASU, Arizona's opponent this week, last week, the Sun Devils lost to Oregon State on the road, falling to 7-4 on the season. Beavers going to 7-4 on the season. This ASU team, I mean, if you just heard the talk around town in terms of the talk around Arizona, you would think they were like 5-6 and having a losing season. They're 7-4, and their season has just fluctuated up and down. I mean, it's hard to get a read on this team. What's your guys' assessment of ASU football?
It feels like typical ASU of the last few years, where you're going, they expect to, be playing for the college football playoff. It feels like every year they kind of feel like they have one of those teams that should be winning the Pac-12 every year, but it's been pretty inconsistent and pretty underachieving over the last several years. I mean, they just haven't lived up to their potential. You look at this roster and you go, they should be a lot better than what they are. I think that's where a lot of, the feeling you have, Troy, about or what you brought up was just, it feels like you look at the fan base reaction, what people think, and you go, oh, they must have a losing record. But no, they're in second place in the Pac-12 South. They can't win it because of Utah, but they feel like they should be, competing for the Pac-12 title. And so they just haven't played up to their level of talent. And right now, that's the other thing. And we'll get to predictions later, I know, but you look at this team, what are they playing for? What is ASU playing for this week? They can't win the Pac-12 South. They already won 7 games, so they're going to a bowl game. A little bit better bowl game. Is that all you're playing for? And outside of, just the typical rivalries. So it's an interesting week for ASU, and it'll be interesting to see how they approach, this weekend's game.
That's not really my take on them. I think this is a good football team. And I think that, that last week, even though they lost, it was a better performance than what U of A put on. And I felt like at times they had a chance to win that game. They were always in it. And I think that talent-wise, like you said, Matt, they've got plenty of talent on that side of the ball. I don't know exactly what element they're missing, but if they're clicking on all cylinders, this is a team that could compete for the Pac-12 championship, I think. So that would make it even sweeter for U of A with the roster that we've got. I'm not saying anything bad about our team, but we're at the bottom of the league right now, and we've proven that we need a lot of work. But if we can beat this team with this roster, given who they are, that make it even sweeter for me.
Yeah, I think just watching ASU, some of the inconsistencies I don't think fall on the defensive side of the ball. I think they've been pretty steady defensively all season long. You have 2 defensive ends that are outstanding. You have middle linebackers like Robinson, who's been really good. Antonio Pierce's son has made big plays in terms of interceptions, fumbles, and stuff like that. But you look at the offense, you had Jaden Daniels. The kid was a 5-star quarterback coming in. and really has been a game manager, kind of like an overrated game manager. He goes through moments where he's hitting his routes, hitting his guys, and then not by his own fault, but they go through moments where they just go into a shell offensively. And you're like, man, you got the weapons, go out and fire the ball downfield, go out and do this. But when you're playing in that shell, you kind of play to the opponent. I know they can run the ball really well, but they've had guys like Brandon Ayuk, N'Keal Harry, and again, they just go into the shell where they're not airing the ball out. They can't take the ball off the top of the defenses, over the top of the defense. And it all falls back for me on Herm Edwards, because yes, he's a great recruiter, great motivator, but what's the difference between Herm Edwards and Todd Graham? Both at the end of the day, 7-5, just a little bit better in the recruiting class.
Well, I don't really watch that much ASU football, but I will say that for the GOAZCATS Nation, it's Thanksgiving. I'm going to eat it my ass off. I'm going to eat as much food as I can. I'm going to get thick. I'm going to sit around and watch college football, and I'm going to be happy. I'll be even happier if we get a win.
So I think we are ready to go to the part of our show today for our game predictions. We wanted to focus more on the stories this week of Joe's experiences in this great rivalry game, hear our takes in terms of what we've seen out there. So after knowing the two teams and seeing what's played out this season, who do you guys got and what's the final score and why?
It goes against every grain in my body to pick Arizona State, so I just can't do it. Even if I don't think we have a chance, I'm going to go 31-27 Arizona. It's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think in the end we have just a little bit more to play for, I think, than Arizona State.
That was close. So earlier in the week, I was asked about it. I said, I just think ASU has too much talent. I don't like the way Arizona played against Washington State. It just felt wrong to me to see them play that, take two steps back. It just didn't feel right. It felt like an anomaly, but I still think that just ASU has too much talent. So I picked ASU to win 31-21. I'm tempted to stick with that, but just based on some different things, hearing the ASU side of things, I talked to one of the writers from ASU, and he was just saying kind of what my point was what do they really have to play for at this point? Just, the more I look at the game, the more I examine it, Arizona going into this, knowing that, hey, Don Brown, I think last week Don Brown had a lot to do with what went on defensively. There was a lot of uncertainty at that time. The defensive guys weren't sure what was going to happen. This week they know. Everything's out on the line. Don Brown is leaving. This is your last game to play for Don Brown and to show him that that he should have stayed. And I think the players are going to take that to heart. I think they're going to play very hard defensively. So I'm going to flip my two teams there. I'm going to go 31-21 Arizona to get the win. I think the defense comes out to play. I think the Don Brown element is going to add to it this week, and I'm switching my score, but I think Arizona pulls it out.
Bear down, Arizona.
Arizona's roster has a lot of kids from Phoenix, like Will Plummer, Gunnar Cruz, and so on and so forth, guys that were overlooked by ASU. Sure, they had aspirations to play there. I mean, growing up in Phoenix, why wouldn't you? They're on Arizona's team now. There's a guy for the U of A named Byron Evans, if I could talk correctly. And he had that same mentality where he was passed over ASU. And whenever they played, he said, okay, it's on. I'm going to show you why you shouldn't have passed over me. And he became one of Arizona's probably top 3 linebackers in school history, played with the Eagles, and always showed out, never lost to ASU too. Then I go back and I think of Mike Stoops' first year. The team wasn't very good. They were 2-9, 2-8. They go to Tempe. No, it was in Tucson. Sorry about that. They played ASU in Tucson with Cutter's team. That was Coach Cutter's team. And ASU was 24 in the country, and Arizona beat them 35-27 to capture the Territorial Cup, carrying Mike Stoops off the field. And I think in that moment, Mike knew what that rivalry was all about. I look at the matchups. Obviously, ASU has more talent, but I think Don Brown plays the factor this week. I think last season's 63-7 fourth down pass plays a huge factor, not only the 70-7, just an embarrassment, total embarrassment. There's that billboard on the way up to Phoenix that has the score that the team will be passing. And Jetfish said he doesn't know what he's going to do, if he's going to pull over and make them look at it. He doesn't know. Probably will just drive right through, but he said he didn't know in the press conference. I'm going to take Arizona 27-17. I think the defense has an amazing game. I don't trust this ASU's offense. I know they have a good running game, but Arizona has shown the ability to stop the run. I know Washington State killed them, but I think that was the situation with Don Brown. Arizona is going to really cause issues in the backfield for ASU. Get to Jaden Daniels, create a couple turnovers in this game. Arizona wins 27-17. They get to see him bear down on the field. It'll be the first victory Arizona's had in Sun Devil Stadium since 2011, when Braxton was it? No. What was his name, Matt? Number 7, quarterback.
Bryson Burney.
Bryson Burney. Thank you. I was going to say Braxton Burney. It's Bryson Burney. Came in and substituted for Nick Foles, and they won the game. Last second play to seal the deal. Arizona gets it done 27-17 in Tempe.
I always like how specific Troy gets with what's going to happen at the end of the game. It's like, he's got his crystal ball, you're looking into the crystal ball. Hey man, this has been a great season to be with you guys. We've had our ups and downs, and it's been a lot of fun talking to you guys. I know we're going to do one more show, but I just want to let you know that I appreciate you guys, and you guys put this thing together, and really appreciate the fans that are listening, that have listened all season long. Love the questions that come in. And you know what? This season sucked. Didn't suck quite as bad as last season, but this season sucked. And we can only go up from here. So thanks for listening in, everybody.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on with us, Joe. We really appreciate it, because this show, Matt and I can do all the analysis work in terms of breaking down teams, but you actually played, and we really appreciate you coming on and giving us your football knowledge. And sometimes your football helmet makes an appearance, but that's awesome too.
Yeah, every once in a while I can add to the conversation.
It just feels right, guys. It just feels right that Arizona gets this win, I think. We'll see what happens, but it just feels like this is the right time for everybody involved. The fans have been through enough. The team's been through enough. It's time to get that win.
It's time to get the win. Beat ASU.
So be sure to follow us this week as we get you ready for the Territorial Cup. Matt and I will both be in Tempe covering the game live in Tempe. So be sure to follow us on Twitter for updates throughout the game. It's going to be a busy weekend here at Arizona. A lot going on, but we'll get you the football game from Tempe. And be sure to follow us on Twitter. Have a good one.
Happy Thanksgiving.